All right, guys, what's up? I'm joined here with Michael McGreevy out of Buffalo, New York. Is that correct?
Yes.
I've
Buffalo,
known
New
Michael.
York.
How long have we known each other for? We met probably a couple of years ago in a mastermind group, I think.
Yeah, I think it was, in between 3 and 2 years, maybe.
Yep. I've randomly found you and the Entrepreneurial Family Man podcast whenever you guys were doing that. I found that, and one of the guys reached out to me, and then I got to be part of that mastermind group, and it was a cool place to be. But since then, you and I have kept in contact. Michael was actually my one-on-one life personal coach for a year or so, and then we've just always kept in contact. And this guy is like the real deal, and I asked him to come on to talk to us about just life, self-belief, being a man, and here he is. Michael, how are you?
I'm great, man. I always love hanging out with you. It's inspiring when our conversations are so inspiring because I think we both get it. We get what it looks like to want to grow ourselves and become better and to invest in ourselves and make the most of the lives that we have. So I'm inspired and excited to have this conversation with you.
Dude, I'm excited. It's like they just flow. It's like we're sitting down and have a cup of coffee. Like nothing's like scripted. We're just going with the flow.
Yeah, exactly.
That's going to lead to my first question. What are your thoughts on the word or the grind or flow? Like, which one do you prefer?
I'm all about the flow, man. Although I will say this with a caveat. There's freedom and discipline. So sometimes you got to grind a little bit to get into the flow.
Okay, I like that. Because I think that a lot of times we as guys are like, we just need to grind it out. Just pound the pavement, put your hands to the grindstone and get the work done. But I feel like that's like a real man. Like that's working hard, which like you said, I like the grind, but also I like the fact of just getting into the flow of things. If I start my morning off right, the rest of my day seems to flow smoothly, and I don't have to buckle down and grind, but it just flows smooth.
Yeah. You know what I'm thinking about right now is Zig Ziglar's pump analogy. You've probably talked about that before.
I don't think so.
When you first start pump, no?
I don't think so.
This is a classic. Okay. Classic example from Zig. He talks about how when you first get started, when you're pumping water out of a well, shows how old Zig Ziglar is. Or maybe you still do that over there in Illinois. I don't know. But when you first start out, like you gotta crank that thing. You gotta push that thing hard to get that water and that suction going so the water can start to come up that pipe, slowly come up that pipe.
Yo.
And what most people do is they grind, and then they don't see anything happen. So then they throw in the towel. They're like, see, it doesn't work. I've been grinding like crazy and I'm not seeing those results. And what Zig says, you got to keep pumping and stay consistent because eventually that water is going to come out. And when it does, and when it starts flowing, you only have to pump half as hard to keep it going. So you can settle into the flow of it once you grind on the front end.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. That makes complete sense.
Yeah, it feels like
I've never heard that, never even thought of it. But I think that for some of the younger generation, they might not have any idea what you're talking about. I was very fortunate that my grandma had one of those, so I knew all about it.
You are kidding me. That's amazing.
She didn't use it, but we would play with it. But yeah, I mean, now I'm thinking back to pumping it, and how hard it was to get that grind started. But then once it was flowing, it was just, dude, that's cool. I like that analogy.
Yeah. The tough thing is most people give up right before they see the water. And they say,
how true is that?
So you got to have a long-term view on those daily habits.
I think that too, when you talk about something like that, it's also having that self-belief that if I keep doing these little things over and over again, that you'll get the results. But like you said, we give up maybe a little bit too early. Have you seen that meme where this guy's like digging for gold and he just gives up a little too early and the other guy just keeps going, he gets it, it's just, but I think our own self-beliefs get in the way of that sometimes. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, they certainly do. And we all have them. Our self-beliefs are shaped by so many different things in life. People that have been around us, the family we grew up in, the experiences that we've had. What happens is through all these different aspects of life, beliefs get downloaded into us and we accept them as absolute truth. And we kind of
paper for this.
Stop it. So then we kind of like, we lock that up and we see, okay, that's true. And I'm just going to be done with that thought because it's true. Let me give you an example. One belief that I have had is do everything yourself. Like you can figure it out. Like just dive in, figure it out, do it yourself. And that has actually served me really well in some areas of life. But where I want to go next, who I want to become, that is not helpful at all. In fact, I need other people's help. I need people who are good at the things that I'm not good at to complement what I'm doing to help me get there. So that's a belief that I kind of accepted and then became a part of me, and I was living out of that. And I was really holding myself back by thinking that way.
Dude, and I think that most men probably fall into that category. How many of us don't want to swallow our pride, our ego, and ask somebody for advice or for help doing something? Because, well, I just got to do it on my own. I got to grind away. You know, I heard a lady say one time when we were at, my wife and I, we were at, what were we? We were somewhere. And this lady, we were talking about stuff. And this lady said, well, my kids ask me for advice a lot. And she was older. She was probably in her 60s. She's like, my kids throughout the years have always asked me for advice. And I've always told them I'm not going to tell them an answer. They have to figure it out for themselves. And I'm like, that's awful. Like now knowing what I know, like I would rather reach out to 5, 6, 7 people and get advice before I start so I can pass through that learning curve quickly and not have to make the mistakes that other people have made, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I couldn't believe it when she said that. I'm like, dude, if my kids ask me questions, I'm going to try to help them out as much as possible. I don't want them to have to go through the failures I went through if they don't have to.
Right. It's almost like their curiosity is being shut down too. Their desire to ask questions and learn. Yeah, that's such a big part of growing.
For sure. So how do we reshape these? You know, how do we reshape these beliefs?
I think it might be helpful to share another example. This one is probably something that most people can identify with. How many times have you heard, I'm just not a morning person?
Oh, as if, oh my gosh.
Right. Yes. Like as if you're born a morning person or not a morning person.
Yes.
And so when somebody says that, they have taken on a belief about themselves that, hey, just the way that I was made, how I was wired, I'm just not the type of guy that gets out of bed and is excited for the day. Oh, yeah. Really? You think you're born with that or not born with that?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. That's such a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. Now, what's more accurate there is you have found more value in sleeping in than you have in getting up early and having a morning routine. And so that's okay. Like that's just where you are. You haven't experienced the value of getting up in the morning and having a routine yet. That's a more accurate way to say that. And what that does is it keeps the door open, the invitation to really find the value in getting up early in the morning. And so that's an important distinction is people do that in 1,000 ways throughout their day. I'm not this, or I'll never be good at this, or I always do this. And as soon as you hear yourself saying something like that, that's a time to really dig in your heels and say, whoa, wait a minute. What's actually true here? Because the moment you speak something over yourself like that, it becomes a truth that you kind of live by, and it dictates your actions in a lot of ways. So that's dangerous stuff when you start speaking things over yourself in that way.
Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I love that.
Yeah.
You know, it's awesome that you use that example because I'm just recently, we're in the process of releasing a 22-day Structure You morning battle plan challenge.
Awesome.
You know, because guys, and you know, the question I like to ask a lot, well, I'm not a morning person. I'm like, well, who told you that? Who told you you're not a morning person? Like, where'd you start believing that at? You know, my kids are always like, I can't do this. I'm like, who told you that? You know, like I don't, as my kids are young, I'm trying to reshape their thoughts. Like, no, we don't say the word can't. Like, we might have struggle with something, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. Yeah. Growth set versus fixed mindset. I love that.
Yeah. You know, a word to use instead of can't, a more accurate word is I won't. And you might be deciding that you won't, and That's okay. Like you might be in a tough season of life or you might not want that, but don't say you can't. Like that you're speaking a lack of capability over yourself by
Yes.
saying I can't. Instead of saying, well, this is a decision I'm making. I'm deciding not to do this because it isn't important to me enough yet.
Exactly. And I've been using the phrase a lot for now. Like
Yeah.
we were started homeschooling our kids for now.
Mhm.
It didn't work out, so we're going to send them back to school for now. And
Yeah.
yeah, I may not be a morning person for now, but in the future, maybe I'll come around to the idea of it. But yeah, saying I can't or just placing that stigma on your thoughts and your actions. It's bad on us.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So this is what I would recommend doing because we all have lots of different beliefs that we have downloaded throughout our lives, and sometimes we're not even aware of them. And they're typically in three categories. It's either helpful for you becoming the person you want to become, or it's getting in the way of the life that you want or the person you want to become, or it's just neutral. Like sometimes we have beliefs that they don't do either. They don't help us and they don't hurt us.
Yeah.
So we need to know what these things are, though, and you know how powerful it is when you put pen to paper on something. And this is really important. Now, if you have some time, I would block out some time and actually begin to write down what are some of these beliefs that I have accepted about myself. What do I think is true about me? Write those down. And as you start to think about this, more and more things are going to come to mind. Now, once you get that list in front of you, that's the first step, is getting these written down. And you got to set aside time. You can't do this while you're walking out the door and spilling coffee and running to your next appointment. This has to be, you have to clear out time for this. And the second step is identifying the positive ones, the negative ones, and the neutral ones. Now, as you look through that list and you identify the negative ones, they either have to be completely thrown out or rewritten altogether. And I spoke a little bit to this earlier, when I'm not a morning person as a self-belief. So let's rewrite that. I haven't yet found the value in my mornings, or whatever that might mean for you. Or I haven't experienced the gift of getting up early. You could say it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's positive ones too, right? There's times when we've had people in our lives that have spoken into us and have opened our eyes to maybe a unique gift that we have or a unique skill that we have to offer to the world. And what's the first thing we do when we hear somebody speak something nice to us as men?
Yep.
No, not really. Like we kind of dismiss it and we're like, oh yeah, you feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe you blush a little bit because somebody said something nice about you. But no, we got to amplify that, not diminish that. We got to say, okay, well, thank you for saying that. That's really good to hear. I wonder how I can use that for good, or I wonder how I can build upon that. Yeah. So that when you see all those positive ones that you've laid out, those self-beliefs that are good and helpful for who you want to become, amplify those things. Don't diminish them.
Love it.
I don't know what to do with the neutral ones. Sometimes they can be helpful. Sometimes they can not be helpful, but let's focus on those positives and negatives for now.
Yeah. I really like the what you mentioned about the negatives. I'd heard recently, my wife started doing this. So I'm big on positive affirmations. And, I've got it even on my phone, on my voice memo. So every morning I listen to myself for 10 minutes, repeating these positive affirmations instead of somebody else's voice. It's my own. But my wife last night, and it was just last night, we were talking about this. She's like, you know what? I'm going to start taking these negative self-beliefs that I have, say it's that I'm not good enough. And I'm going to start speaking absolute truths to those specific thoughts. Like anytime I have a negative thought, I'm going to write it down and I'm going to write, I am more than enough. I am a good person. I am qualified to do these things. And I was like, dude, that's good. Like you said, taking time, blocking time out to really think about those thoughts that we have. Because how many times do we just think those thoughts and we believe them? Yeah, we always believe them. That negative self-talk is just killer.
It is killer.
I told her, I
And
said, I just need some like positive praise music to run in my subconscious all the time instead of just the negative stuff. Because, with my spirituality, I sometimes think that I'm at a place now to where I feel like I'm doing some good things compared to what I was. But then it's like, well, God's happy with what I'm doing, but the devil's like, dude, I see that light bulb that went off above your head, So now I'm coming after you because I don't want you to do these things. So it's like almost like he's trying to keep me down here. And I had another guy tell me, I was kind of explaining that to him. He's like, well, yeah, because all of his other cronies he doesn't have to spend as much time on them because he's already got them where he wants them. You're trying to help people change. And so he's coming after you harder. I'm like, I guess that makes sense.
yeah, there's a couple of scriptures that really drive that point home, Mike. And one is, you've probably heard, as a man thinketh,
Yes.
so is he. So what you think, you become what you think about. Earl Nightingale talks about that. And this process of going through these negative self-beliefs and speaking truth over them is really transforming your mind. It's renewing your mind. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's what that scripture speaks to, is there's so much power in your thoughts. And we have to be intentional about not accepting these negative thoughts that are so easily accessible and holding on to those helpful, positive thoughts. And that sounds a little bit like woo-woo, like think positive, but that is not it at all. I mean, that's some deep, challenging work to dive into that and to shape your thoughts. And that's up to us to do that.
You're right. And I think too, whenever we want, so any guy that's not guy or anybody that's not happy with their life, you have to peel back those layers of that onion and figure out kind of what's going on. But that's hard stuff to do. Nobody wants to go and do those things. But even I'm sitting here thinking about doing these types of things, setting aside time to do that. Like, how do you what's the best time to do something? Or when if you block off a set amount of time, like, okay, we're in a group called Structure You. How do you structure your day to, because I'm not sure. Do you structure time every single day to work on personal development? How's your day structured? Do you have a morning routine?
Yeah, I do. And I do a lot of experimenting. I don't think there's one way to have a morning routine. And I actually like variety. So if I did the exact same thing every day, I would just get bored with doing the exact same thing. So
yes.
In this season, I can tell you what my structure is, right? In this season, I kind of hurt my ankle, and it's been plaguing me for the last several months. I don't know what's going on with it, but I haven't been able to run. And so, but I can walk. And so what I've been trying to do before my day starts is get 10,000 steps in. Sometimes it's 8,000, sometimes it's 9,000. But during that time, that's when I'm thinking, that's when I'm praying, that's when I'm listening to an audio book, or if I have some thoughts, I'll record them and share them. And so that's really become my time. It's a good hour and a half before anyone's up. It's still dark outside. And I live up here in Buffalo, and it's cold. Like this morning, it was 8 degrees, and I was out there walking around talking. And so that's what works for me in this season. And I'm pretty intentional about how I structure things. Now, if you think about just what your life looks like and what your business looks like, I've recognized that I really want to be flexible and spend a lot of time with my family and my wife. Like, that's really important to me. So I decided in advance, that's going to be what I build my life around, is having the flexibility to spend a lot of time with my family. And so what I've done is kind of came up with an idea of how much time I want to do that. And then I built my business to fit into my life versus my life fitting into my business.
Ooh, I like that.
Pretty backward. And I have a coaching practice, and I have appointments every other week. So 2 weeks out of the month is when I coach. And then on those other 2 weeks, I can do whatever I want. Now, sometimes that means I'm working on my business, preparing for a presentation or whatever that might look like. But sometimes it's just going sledding with my kids, or going on a day date with my wife, or going on a vacation randomly in the middle of winter and during the school year. So I've decided in advance to be intentional about having that flexibility to do every other week. And it's been a lot of hard work to get to that point, but man, it's great because it really allows me that opportunity to live authentically to what I want my life to be like.
That's so cool. So before you started it, you had a vision for what you wanted, and then you kind of reverse engineered it. Like, this is how I'm going to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we're getting a little bit outside of the scope of structuring my day, but this is like how I've structured my life.
Yeah.
And
it's awesome. I love it.
But in order to have, even in order to enjoy that flexibility, having my days structured is so, so important. Like if I don't start my day off on a firm foundation with that prayer time, with that time to reflect, to collect my thoughts, to renew my mind, like if I'm not doing that on a daily basis, even my flexibility that I'll have will kind of be sabotaged, to be honest. It's not going to be what it could be without that.
I like what you said there. I got to sneeze on a second.
Yeah, bring it.
Because I find too, like my wife and I have said, our mornings are non-negotiable. Like you, I kind of get pretty rigid in my structure. Like I like to know exactly what I'm doing, but I also like the flexibility of, like, this morning, one of my kids came and hopped in bed with me, and I had like 3 or 4 things I still would like to have gotten done before I got my day started. But then I'm also taking into the fact that my kids are only going to be this age one time. You know, tomorrow they may decide that they don't want to snuggle with their dad in bed. So I'm going to take advantage of this, you know?
Yeah.
But it's also, like you said, having that flexibility that, and also knowing, and I think this was hard for me to accept, that if something didn't go as planned, in the past, I would think that the rest of the day was shot. You know, if I'm not sticking to this schedule and something doesn't go right, it's haywire, the day's gone. You know, but I realized, no, Mike, you're okay. You know, just because something didn't go exactly as you had planned, it's okay. And so I think that too, with structuring my mornings and my days, like having that, like you said, that flexibility, or the overall just, you know, what's that, like being fluid, like water, like going with the waves and understanding, like, it'll be okay. Like I can get back on track. It's all good.
I'm so glad you said that, because even guys with morning routines make it seem like they got it so tightened up that they won't miss it no matter what. And it's non-negotiable. But you're right. You're telling me you're going to say, honey, I got to do my push-ups right now, so I'm not going to hug you.
Yeah, exactly.
Guess what? If I get the opportunity to do what's most important, spend time with my family, connect with my kids, I can walk tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Exactly. And I think too, we as men sometimes, and even I'm working with a lot of guys now that are struggling with the work, family, home balance. Like they're really struggling with that.
Yeah.
And for me, I had to really put that into perspective, because I kind of dealt with the same thing. But, you know, I wanted that. As I look back on what I wanted to envision for my future, it was time freedom. Obviously, the money's important, but it was time freedom to do these things with my family. So like you said, if like this morning, I have a long day scheduled today. I have a lot of stuff I want to get done. My kids, my 2 oldest, get on the school bus. My boy's like, will you play this game with me? And I'm like, dude, I got so much stuff to do. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to play this game with you. So we sat down and played a board game for like a half hour. I'm like, this half hour is not going to ruin my day, you know? And if anything, and my wife played too. So next thing, I'm like getting quality time with the family. And so I'm like, this is perfect, you know? But we sometimes are so rigid that we're like, no, I can't do that. I got to do this. And I'm like, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
But how do we change those beliefs to thinking it's okay? It's okay to spend that extra half hour with the family, and, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's a deeper dive into what your values are, right? So if you're unclear about what you value the most, then those decisions are going to be really difficult to make. Now, if you take the time again to sit down and start to think through what is most important in life, and not just give lip service to it or write down what you should think is most important. No, really, what is most important to you and your family, and start to prioritize those things. And what that becomes is a filter, a decision-making filter, because where oftentimes I go wrong and other men go wrong is when you have to always make that decision in the moment over and over again. And you get that decision fatigue because there's so many decisions to make throughout the day. But if you do that deep work of really getting clear on what your values are, those decisions are already made for you.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, what do I value most? And what am I going to be all in on during this time? And that's very clear. If you've done that work in advance, decision made, done.
Ooh, I love that. Decision fatigue. How real is that? I never even heard it put that way, but yeah. And so for me, if I plan my day out, I already know how things are going to go. And depending if you're living with your moral code in place and integrity, a lot of the things that come up, I'm like, no, doesn't fit into my priority list. Like, no.
Yeah. And that's when we really start to feel stress and overwhelm, is when our life is incongruent with what we value most.
Yes.
Like our life, how we're living on a day-to-day basis does not reflect our values. That's when we really become uncomfortable, kind of checked out, burned out, however you want to describe that. So if you're feeling that way right now, maybe your life is not reflecting what you truly value.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of guys, and this isn't even just in this group. This is worldwide. What's the percentage of people that don't enjoy going to work? Like, how do we get guys more motivated to start following their passions and their dreams? I like that question. If you were going to die next year, what would you do differently? What would you do today? Because you realize most stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's a good question to reflect on, for sure.
Yeah. So when talking to people, I got a list of questions I like to ask some people. We talked about your morning routine, your structure. Do you have an evening routine?
I wouldn't call it a routine, but I have some rules for my evening.
Ooh, rules. I like that.
Yeah. One time, or I was in a really difficult season just in life, 3 little kids. Frankly, my wife was really overwhelmed. I mean, 3 kids in diapers, and I'm working all day. It was just one of those seasons where it was just really hard. And I was working with a coach at the time. The coach suggested that I ask my wife this question of, what's the hardest part of your day? And so I said, oh, okay, that's kind of a simple question, but it's interesting. So I asked my wife, Lydia, that question, and she told me, by the time 4:30 rolls around, I'm exhausted from being with the kids all day, and I just don't feel like making dinner. I don't even want to think about what I have to put together for dinner. That's just like the hardest part of my day. I'm like, really? Okay, well, how about I end my day exactly at 5:00 and I'll make dinner? Would that be helpful? Or if I take the kids? She's like, oh yeah, that would be a huge help. I'm like, all right, cool. So that's what we did. And now from now on, I have in my calendar, a notification goes off at 5:00, day is done, and I'm in. Like, here I come. I'm playing with the kids. I'm going to help with dinner. I'm going to be present for that time. So in the past, I would have probably taken a lot of different appointments in the evening. I would have planned other things, but knowing that my wife, for her, that's the toughest time, I'm just going to be there for it.
How awesome is that? One simple question, lighten the load on her, made you guys' evenings, I'm sure, go a lot smoother. Just one little question.
It does. And it's easy to assume that what's really hard for our wives. And sometimes we make that decision for them. Well, obviously it's this, so I'm going to help you with this. And we haven't even heard that from them, or we haven't even asked them. So we can't assume what our wives need, and how we can support them. We have to ask them. And that's an ongoing conversation, because that changes from season to season.
I like it. I like it a lot, because we as men, my goal is always to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't need to fix the problem. I just need to sit there and listen.
Yeah.
And that's been hard, but and even last night, like, I was sitting at my computer working, and she's running around like a chicken with her head cut off, trying to give the kids baths and do this. I'm like, what are you doing, Mike? So I stop at, hey, what can I help you with right now to help the ship sail smooth,
Yeah.
And I don't remember what she asked me to do, but I'm like, dude, no problem. Here we go,
Right.
And then the rest of the night just went a lot smoother. Not that it was going bad, but, anything I can do. I think we sometimes are just selfish. We're selfish creatures, I'm like, well, what I'm doing is important. It's busy. But I'm like, I can easily do this once the kids go to bed. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, that brings up another challenge too for men in general. And I'm not excluded from this, but a lot of our worth is tied up in what we accomplish and what we get done. And that's difficult. Like that pops up a lot for men. If we don't feel like we got a lot done, who are we? Right? What value do we bring?
Yeah.
And so that's what makes it so tough to step away from work and into family life when you're not really doing anything tangible with family life often, right? Sometimes you're just there playing with blocks, depending on what age your kids are, or reading a book, and it doesn't feel like you're accomplishing much. So how can you trade like your duty as a man to provide and accomplish for just this seemingly idle time with your kids? And I think that's also a bit of a lie too, that, you know, you don't hear too many kids when they look back on their life, too many adults when they look back on their life, I wish my parents would have just worked a little harder instead of spent so much time with me. You just never hear that, right? It's always, I just wanted to be with my dad more. Like that's what you hear more than anything else.
Yeah.
So it's a short season. Like those, like you said, like our kids are this age for only, I mean, for most of it's what, a 10 to 20 year block that we get to be with our kids as much as we can.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in the grand scheme of life, that's like what, a sixth, a seventh, and eighth of our life.
Man.
Wow. Let's
hearing you say that makes me want to go in and spend more time with my kids right now, you know? Like how true is that? Because you know, if I'm still providing for my family, there's money in the bank, there's food on the table, roof over our heads, the heat's on, they're clothed, I can go make money once they're out of the house. Like, because I think a lot of times we find our value too and our worth in how much money we have. Like, how much money do you make? What kind of work do you do? Which is, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I feel like it's kind of irrelevant. You know, for a long time, I used to say, well, I'm a power. Before I would say, like, well, I'm an insurance salesman. And I felt cool. I wore a shirt and tie to work. Like people looked at me differently.
Yeah.
I started saying, well, I'm a power washer. Then people look at you completely differently because I'm dirty all the time. But also then I would justify it. Well, yeah, well, I'm making 5 times more money than I was as an insurance agent. I'm justifying. I'm like, this is not how I want to live my life. You know, justifying to other people who I don't even care what they think, but I'm trying to find my value in that.
Yeah.
So,
thanks for being real with that, Mike. I mean, I think everyone can resonate with that. You know, it's something really interesting has happened because I talked to a lot of my coaching clients about this dynamic, and their big fear is if I let off the gas on what I'm doing with work, like I'm going to fall behind and I'm going to lose my grasp, and I'm just not going to be able to be successful. And the crazy thing that happens as I see guys step into spending more time with their wives, spending more time with their families, engaging fully when they're with their families, you see the opposite happen. It's the craziest thing. It's like, it's backward. It doesn't make any sense, but there's some kind of confidence that comes with that I put my work down and I'm fully with my family, that when they go back to work, instead of going back feeling like, oh man, I didn't spend enough time with my family, they're probably mad at me. Like you're not bringing that type of baggage back to work. You're bringing man, I went all in with my family and now I'm going to go all in with work. And that just brings, like, you multiply the hours that you are working when you think that way.
Ooh, that's awesome. It's so true. And, you know, even my personal experience, you know, so I fell into that category for 1.5 years, basically going on almost 2 years. Like my businesses kind of fell by the wayside. However, I stopped and I got all of my other priorities in order. You know, my spirituality with the Lord, my relationship with my spouse, relationship with my kids, and my health and fitness. And then business was 5th on the list. And it really took a tumble. We made a lot less money this year. However, I was more focused on these types of things. We ended up with more money in the bank account. I don't know how it was possible, making less money. But also it gave me a whole new vision for how I wanted to run my business. Yeah, it may have went on down a little bit, but now I come back with a whole new mindset on how we're going to grow this business. And it's like, man, and I heard this phrase from you years ago, and it's really stuck with me about sometimes, Mike, you need to slow down to speed up. And I feel like my life has slowed down to almost a crawl, especially in the business aspect of it. But I know come spring, like we're going to the moon this year. And it's because I've had time to think about these things and prioritize things. And now I'm like you said, once you focus on these priorities, other things have a chance to grow, and it's grown, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely. I love that example. It's so good. Sometimes you can equate it to getting stuck in the snow. You can always tell when somebody is from the South when they get their car stuck, because what do? They bury the gas to the floor, and they're smoking the tires, and the car's not going anywhere. Isn't that like us too? When we're trying to outwork like our lack of intention and thought, and taking that time to really plan and focus on what's most important. And true. We end up stuck in that cycle. And what we need to do is find that rhythm and slowly get those tires to catch and roll it until you can move forward in a more balanced and consistent, sustainable way.
That's cool. And, and with that being said, there are times where I felt like I'm doing my family a disservice because I'm not focusing on this stuff. But then, like you said, it goes back to my long-term vision. My long-term vision was being able to take my kids to the zoo on a Tuesday if I want to. So I have to always revert back to that. Because like you said, they're only going to be around for 10, 20 years. I need to kind of shape them and mold them into just good people,
And that is important work.
Yeah.
Valuable, worthwhile work that, you're not going to get a big high five from too many people by doubling down on your family.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, isn't it?
That is crazy. We spent some time talking. So I want one final question.
Sure.
You've got any book in the world to recommend to people? What do you recommend?
I already told you before this. I hate this question because for me, it's the season that I'm in that I love certain books in the season that I'm in. So I don't like closing off my options and saying, oh, this is the one book.
Yeah.
Outside of the Bible, what I'm really enjoying right now and getting a lot of value out of, I actually have it right here, is this book, Atomic Habits.
Oh, dude, yeah.
By James Clear. And,
look, I got his little journal right here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It just
That's
speaks
awesome.
to the power of habits and a little bit of what we talked about today and how identity is really important too, when it comes to what you speak over your life. So saying I'm not a morning person is speaking to your identity when it's not an identity issue. What type of person do you want to be? And then letting your self-talk match that. Like if you are a successful person, what does a successful person do? They get up early and they start their day right. I am the type of guy that gets up early and sets his day on a firm foundation. Yeah. And if you start speaking in terms like that, it flows into your actions and what you do. So I'm really enjoying that book now.
Dude, I love that book. And, doing those things like we talked about, you may not see results instantly. It's like, digging for that gold. And like James talks about in that book, getting 1% better every day. You may never actually see the results until you look back for like a year ago. I'm like, dude, I've changed a lot in a year. That's how my life was all like, well, I used to be like that guy. It's like, that's crazy. But, and whenever you focus on those things and you focus on personal development, I asked this question in Structure You the other day, like, do you focus more on your work or on personal development and growing yourself? Because I know when I've focused on actually growing myself, all the other stuff takes care of itself. Like my relationship with my wife right now is at an all-time high. Like I don't know how to keep it up this high, because it was on the verge of the opposite there for a long time. And I didn't even know because I thought that I was just conforming to the ways of the world. Thought I was being a normal dude.
Yeah.
But once I started taking those small action steps with Atomic Habits was one of the books that led me down that path, So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Dude, I like you a lot, Mike.
You're a stud, Mike.
Dude, I appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to Maybe I'll when we release this, we'll post some comments down there for people to follow you. You're instructor, you right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Good deal. Yeah, Michael's got a coaching practice, and I worked with them for a year. So yeah, this guy's got good stuff, and I really enjoyed it. And I know that you helped shape the person that you're talking to right now.
I appreciate you saying that. It's an honor. And anyone who's listening to this, if you haven't worked with Mike, like in a coaching capacity, what are you waiting for? Like, this guy's perspective is going to change your life. So if you're thinking about coaching, call him and sign up for his coaching package. It's going to change your life.
Dude, I appreciate that. That's nice.
I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it.
You're the man. Well, Michael, I appreciate you taking the time, and I think that I hope that guys got lost. I know I did. I took 2 pages of notes, so good stuff. All right, Michael, I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, my man.
We'll see